everyone. Long time no see. I'm so excited to join you for another Groundskeeper chat. My name is Meg Kruger. I'm the content specialist with Pioneer Athletics. And today I am joined by familiar faces to anyone who's been to the Sports Field Managers Association conference. They're one of the top billing artists, as they like to say. They give a talk about work-life balance, relationships that I'm really excited to dive deep into. I will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves because I'm sure I wouldn't do it justice. So go ahead, the Goatleys, you guys take it away.
I'm Lisa Goatley. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been a therapist for, 34 or 35 years. It's hard to keep track. I've been working in various settings. I've been in community mental health. I've worked for a private hospital. I taught for a little bit as an adjunct faculty member in the psychology department at Mississippi State. I've been in private practice. And that's where I currently am now. I'm in solo private practice here in Blacksburg, Virginia. I work with people who are experiencing mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, marital problems, family problems, stress. I work with a lot of people who have experienced trauma in their lives. I'm actually also a certified clinical trauma professional. And that's, pretty much the bulk of my day is working with the patients who come in for psychotherapy.
And I'm Mike Goatley. I am Lisa Goatley's husband. I'm a professor and extension turfgrass specialist at Virginia Tech. Been at Tech now 20 years, almost 20 years, 15 years at Mississippi State, getting my career started. And I'm now become the I might get invited speaker because Lisa is definitely the most popular one. It's being requested to talk about these types of subjects.
Yeah, I think something that's really unique is anytime someone brings you guys up in the industry, it's like you have repeat customers to your talk, people that have come and seen it almost every year because, something resonated with them or they wanted to see it again so that maybe they could put things into practice this time around. But it definitely holds some merit within the industry as an important topic, an important lesson, and really in any industry. Mental health and work-life balance is the backbone of a healthy career. And I'm sure just from listening to what you guys had to say about your long careers, a lot of that, starts at the home front. Having a healthy home really bleeds into having a healthy work life. And it's hard to set that up when you're first starting out, especially because sometimes we have like such a short window on how we're thinking, like, okay, I could do this for the next year. I could do this for the next 3 years, maybe. But it's like when you get into the 5, 10, 15 years of your career, you cannot sustain some of the bad practices that it's so easily to fall into. So that really leads me to my first question. How important is it for people to set those boundaries or expectations of work-life balance early on in their career?
Yeah. One of the things I actually have a presentation that's called Managing Stress and Avoiding Burnout. And, one of my first points in that presentation is to talk about what your goal is. And if your goal is to have longevity in your career or longevity in anything, we have to have some healthy habits around some of those things because while we can do lots of really difficult things for a little bit, we can't do it forever. And some of our practices just aren't sustainable. We can do them for short periods of time, but they begin to take their toll pretty quickly, and there'll be consequences. So it's important to begin thinking about what is my goal? What do I want from this? Both my personal relationship and my relationship with my career. So I think it's important to do that. One of the topics that we have, one of the segments in our work-life balance presentation is called What We've Learned Sometimes the Hard Way. We didn't always do it. We didn't always have good practices around some things, and there were some difficult times that we learned from. And, we hope people can learn from some of our mistakes and maybe not make the same things.
Yeah, it's not a comfortable topic. And we tell stories about all the mistakes that I made early in my career and as a parent, and how I was blessed to have such a very patient, understanding wife who just happened to be a counselor and could have really rode me the riot act. And then every now and then I get the riot act about, what matters to you, the importance of it. But the thing that kind of got us thinking about doing this, first of all, she became much more comfortable because as a turf person, all I talk about is turf. As a counselor, all she talks about is counseling, but we listen to each other. And one of my former students called me one time, and after we were shooting the breeze about all of our sports teams and the stuff that in our world thought mattered, he got to his real question, which was he was having trouble in his marriage. And he's like, I really don't want to talk to you. I need to talk to Mrs. Goatley. And that was a first step that got me thinking that, I've made many of the same mistakes this person has, didn't realize I was making the mistakes. And what if we could head this off at the pass? And as you say, we get the repeat customers. I do think people, the more you hear this, the more you think, and then maybe the more that you get comfortable in sharing. What we're constantly looking for is the audience who we're trying to attract is the audience that's least interested in this. And that's usually the young people who are more focused on that career aspect because this is what they've been working for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And I think it's because, at the start of your career, you're encouraged to take internships, even if they're unpaid. You're encouraged to be the one that's the first one to show up, the last one to leave. And it's, this culture around like the grind or paying your dues or things like that. And, how do we really combat that culture around, paying your dues and being the first one there, the last one to leave, and really creating a healthy balance from the get-go at the forefront?
I think that, there's nothing wrong with being a hard worker. And I think we have to define, what our value system is and how we can make some reasonable choices around that. Sometimes maybe you need to be the first one in and the last one to go. One of the things Mike talks about is, seasons in our in the work, that you all do. There are seasons that are busier and seasons that are less busy. I think the challenge becomes when that becomes your habit and that's what you're doing every single day, year after year. I also think we have to begin to fight the perception that if you're attentive to work-life balance, it means that you're not dedicated to your profession or not working hard. I know plenty of people who work hard and are very dedicated and devoted to what they do, and also at times choose to leave when it's appropriate, when there's a thing in their family or, just to be able to be at home a little more frequently, particularly if it's in one of those down seasons where it's not necessary to be there. And I think we just have to keep, fighting that perception that, you're lazy or you're not devoted if you do make choices to at times put your family life first.
And I think it's up to the individuals got to do their homework up front about positions that they're applying for. This comes down to internships. And I've always encouraged students, maybe you want to go to that, that pinnacle spot to find out, does that make you tick or not? And if you go and find out this is absolutely not for me, and student comes back complaining about what a wasted, internship that was. And I was like, it wasn't wasted at all. Now you've got a taste of what you like or don't like. But I think you've got to do, the homework about, this place has got quite the reputation. Now I'm going to find out, is this type of facility what meets my needs for, my life, my job, my career, my family? Sometimes you don't know until you get there. But the thing that's changed, Meg, is that as I think I see it, we'll let Lisa say yay or nay, but we are talking about it more than we ever did, because my generation was definitely one that was still, you work 60, 70, 80 hours a week and you get up and you better come back next week, ready to go again, because that's just the way we do it.
Yeah, I do think the culture is changing. And whenever there's beginning to be a shift in culture, in this case, it's work culture, there's some difficulty around it, right? And there's, some changing perceptions. One of the most searched criteria for a job on Indeed currently is work-life balance. So, if when people are on Indeed looking at jobs, there's a whole category that says work-life balance for job postings that mention work-life balance.
So many things to touch on there, but I do agree, like, especially with my generation, the conversation is, how often can I work from home? And that's not because I want to sit and watch TV. It's because I know that I want to be in the home with my kids, when they get home from school, making them a snack or what have you. And I think that there's a lot of reputation about, oh, they might be lazy or they're not willing to work. And how much of that do you really think holds merit? And how much of that do you think is just the next generation really fighting for that balance?
A little bit of both. And it's a great question for which there isn't a slam dunk, this is the way it should be answer, because I think every generation is going to feel like, oh, if I went to school uphill, came home uphill, snowing, it's always going to be that mindset that the next generation is going to have it easier. And I think as parents, we're hoping that our kids will have a better way, an easier path to success. So I don't have the answer for you. I do think that these attitudes are changing. I think this ability that communication that we've always got at the tip of our tongue about the importance. I think it takes a little experience to get out there and to feel comfortable talking to our bosses. But I do believe the bosses are now becoming a little bit of a younger generation. So I think those attitudes are changing. And I think these are things that need to be discussed openly up front. Don't be afraid to bring that up with a supervisor and find out what are the expectations. The one thing that in the world of sports turf management is, as Lisa was talking about the seasons, it's when you got to be there, you just got to be there, unless it's just absolutely, you're ill, family members ill. This is something very serious. We just went through this here with the Goatley household this weekend. I got some great colleagues that brought a load of sprigs to me from Kentucky on Saturday that had to go on the ground
Saturday afternoon.
And that wasn't on anyone's docket. And my group showed up, and one of my best helpers couldn't make it because he had made plans with his brothers and sisters for Father's Day weekend with their dad. And he took care of things from another perspective and met some things that I needed to have done. But we all jumped in out there, got it done. I'm really appreciative. They know that, later on, they need a half day off here sometime. That's obviously theirs for the taking, but there were no questions asked. I don't work on a weekend. It was just great to have a team that we communicate regularly. They knew I needed help and I didn't have to go begging for help.
And also to go back to what you were talking about before, just people doing their own vetting system or their own research when they're looking into joining a company, because it is on you just as much if you sign up and say, I am willing to work weekends and this and that, and then, halfway through be like, yeah, I don't actually want to. I had an experience when I first entered, I have a journalism degree. So I went and worked at an agency. And I talked about, we went out to lunch that first day and I was talking about, I just can't wait to have kids. I was newly married. I was like, I'm so excited for that chapter. And we get back to the office and my manager pulls me aside and was like, yeah, maybe don't talk about that as much. Like, you're not going to get a promotion here. You're not going to get opportunities if they know that you're going to be out on maternity leave every couple weeks. And I wouldn't have known that from nobody's going to say, I can't believe somebody actually did say it, but nobody's going to tell you that in an interview or even, the first couple of weeks, you really do have to vet and do your research and also get in there sometimes and experience it and be like, okay, now I know this isn't for me. And I know when I interviewed with Pioneer, I made it very clear. What is your maternity policy? Because I will be having kids here shortly. And I made it clear, like, this is something on my agenda. And they made it clear that they were a company that was going to support that. And they've kept up their end of the bargain. And it's like, you really don't know how things are going to play out until you experience it. That's the great, what we call is life. You have to experience a lot of it. But I do think that was a great point that, it's on us. It's our responsibility as employees and candidates for jobs to try and do as much vetting and research as you can before getting in the position as well.
I think nobody goes into a job saying, I want to screw this up or I want to do poorly here, right? Nobody says like, I don't want to be successful today, or I want to mess this up as much as possible. Like nobody goes into a work situation or a day saying that. Sometimes that happens if there's a mismatch or if there's not clear communication. So, in the therapy process, whenever anybody's coming in for the first time, they think it's a process of, me interviewing them to decide if I want to work with them. I also tell them this is as much a process of you interviewing me to see if I'm a good fit for you. And I think the same happens in an employment situation. The employee needs to also interview the employer to see if that's going to be a good fit so that it's successful for everyone, right? Nobody wants a failure experience here, but sometimes we don't plan accordingly in asking the questions that we need to ask. And it also starts with us knowing ourselves and knowing our value system, what our priorities are, what we want from life, what we want from our career, so that we can find an employer where there's a good fit for that. And work culture is some of that, right? Like if you're in a, kind of a high, what's the word for it? High profile work situation where they expect you to be on, 14 on and available 14 hours a day or on call 24 hours a day, right? And that's not right for you. That's not going to work. Everybody's going to be unhappy.
And to kind of take it onto the home front end of it, what conversations need to be happening? What kind of communication tactics or tidbits can you guys share with us to make sure that, the relationships at home are flowing nicely into what you have going on at work?
Yeah. One of the biggest issues I see when I work with couples around communication is just simple miscommunications because it's lack of transfer of knowledge, right? So I recommend that couples every week have a business meeting, right? And that's where you sit down and look at the schedule. When do I have to be at work? I have to be in early on this particular date, or I have to work late on this particular date, or we have a kid with a dentist appointment that requires someone to leave work to do the transportation. Have a business meeting so that you know all the things that are on your calendar and all the expectations. Like, this is what my work week looks like. This is what your week looks like. This is what needs to happen around that. So there are no surprises that then generate feelings, right? One of the stories we tell is about Mike doing, as an extension agent, he does lots of travel. And, I have this calendar that I keep on the counter, and he's supposed to write down all of his travel on there. And there was one time that he goes down to the basement and gets his suitcase and brings it up. And I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm leaving for Minneapolis tomorrow. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean you're leaving for Minneapolis tomorrow? So, that was definitely a breakdown in communication that generated a lot of feelings on my part. And so I think just the communication about the nuts and bolts of what our week looks like is important.
And in our family, the calendar is supposed to be, I always am the one that's making the mistakes, but the calendar is that is the holy grail. If it's not on the calendar, then it's not in existence.
Like, nope, that's not happening. It's not on the calendar.
And I'm like, I know I've got a trip to Virginia Beach here in a few days.
On the calendar.
I think she probably put it on the calendar for me because we've talked about it. But that's kind of our rule is don't talk about it. It's on the calendar so that we can both compare what the heck is going on. So knowing what each other is doing, finding those, we talk about the seasons in the world of managing the turf, but then the seasons of your relationship requires the same type of communication. And for us, it's always figuring out like, all right, there's some times where I'm just busy. Everything's blowing up because there's disease, there's weeds, people are losing grass right and left. I've got to be there to hold their hands, hopefully get them through this crisis. But then there are other times in which she's always reminding me, and she's already said it about, well, when are those periods which you can give me some of that time? And how do we have that programmed into that calendar?
And that's so funny that you guys mentioned that, because when we had our second son here just a few months ago, I bought a calendar on Amazon, and I was like, I think we need something like this. Like, there were too many doctor's appointments, too many like things that were 15 minutes before, like, well, who the hell is doing this? Like, and
Right.
and that was when I wasn't even back to work. So it seems like a simple, silly thing, but it could save a lot of arguments down the road.
Yeah.
I know, and let me know if you guys have experienced this at all, but like when my husband went to take a new job, it was a pay bump, but we understood that that probably means, a responsibility bump, like you said, a high profile, being on call all the time, things like that. And as a family, it was like, okay, well, what are we getting with this pay bump? Like, let's put it on a scale next to what it's going to require for the whole family. And I think a lot of people, and myself included in the past, maybe don't have those initial conversations, because you might see a dollar sign and be like, well, yeah, that'd be really nice to have some extra money laying around. But what does that really mean for us here on the home front? Does extra money mean time to, or money to hire a nanny to help with the kids? Or does it mean, more vacations? Do we value that more than time at the end of the day together? Or, just those general breakdowns of, how is this going to play out into our lives?
And I think being very conscious about having those conversations, what is our value system? A lot of couples don't have that conversation, so what's our value system? What do we prioritize? What's important to us? And, what's the risk benefit analysis in that? So what are we giving up? What are we gaining? What are we giving up? And is that worth it to us? And that answer is going to be different for everybody, right? There's no one right or wrong answer. You just have to make sure you have a conversation about that and really talk through it. And then I think also reevaluate. Sometimes we make a decision and we feel like, well, okay, I've made that decision. I have to stick with it for the next 15 years. No, you don't, right? Like sometimes we don't know everything going in. It is okay for us to reevaluate and say, is this working for us? Is this not working for us? What adjustments might need to be made? And sometimes we end up in a job situation that's not what we had expected it to be, or it is what we expected it to be, and we find we don't really like it all that much, or it's not tolerable, or what I found I thought I could give up and sacrifice, I can't. That's not worth it to me. And it is okay for us to reevaluate and then, make corrections in our decisions and make changes.
Very good. And, I had in here as the questions like a recipe for success, but I think it's become evident just in our conversation that there is no recipe that is an umbrella over every couple or every job or every manager-employee relationship. It's really about navigating your way to find something that works for all the parties involved. But is there anything that you guys have found specifically with sports field managers that you think could be put into practice, or just even something kept in their back pocket as a way to kind of navigate this work-life balance?
Well, the one thing I'd say, we have what we would term principles to say, well, I think this applies to everyone. And this wouldn't necessarily just be sports field managers. This could be anyone, but we talk about it in our presentation. And this one kind of evolved over the past few years about be present. And be present is a pretty common sense strategy that when you finally do have some time together, to actually make sure that, she's listening to me. More likely, am I really listening to her about what is being said and paying attention? Because I think a lot of us in the turf industry, and I'm an academic, Meg, so I always tell them, hey, I'll teach you how to not kill the grass, but you all grow the grass and do all the art of it. I'm the science behind it. But I want people to understand that I come home, I'm stressed. Back early in my career, I had to get tenure. It took all this extra time. And it's like, it's all about me. And then I would come home and find out from her, like, what she'd been doing with 2 young kids and all this. And I was like, I would always tell anyone, there was never any longer day in my life than a day when she had to go to work and I was left at home with the kids. And it was like, come home at 6 o'clock at night. The kids are still in their pajamas. When are we going to eat? And where'd that bruise come on the kid's face? And I was like, I would much rather have been at work than I would have for trying to be the caretaker of that. So I tell, be present. Don't assume your job is tougher than your spouse's, and keep that communication going.
I think in that same vein, I would say having a spirit of appreciation, right? Always try to cultivate a spirit of appreciation. Everyone's job is hard. Everyone's doing their best, right? Try not to have what I call a zero-sum mentality in your relationship, which is a zero-sum mentality is if you win, I lose. And if I win, you lose. Everybody needs to win, right? There can't be a loser in your relationship. That's not a very healthy perspective to have. And you'll see problems there. So cultivating a spirit of appreciation, having a win-win attitude, that we're on the same team perspective. We're not on opposite teams. We're on the same team. I think that's just really important to try to, maintain that positive relationship, even during the difficult times. It's all about communicating, but, treating your partner with respect and communicating, even, like I said, even when it's difficult, kind of cultivating that, that loving, respectful spirit in your relationship.
Yeah, I think that is something so common in all relationships is like you come home at the end of the day and there's just that assumption like I've had a day and I'm tired. And I heard something really great. It was probably on TikTok, honestly. It was like a couple therapists say that him and his wife, like when they get back together, whether it's at the end of a long work day or it's in the morning before they have a long travel day or something, they check in on what percentage that person's at. Like, what's your battery level? If they're both at 100% or both at 80%, great. Like, we're gonna knock this day out of the park. If one of them's like, I've got 20%, it's like, okay, I've got you. I can carry the extra weight today. And then, hopefully the next time that you're at 20%, your partner can pick up the extra slack. And I thought that was a really cool way to just those quick check-ins, like, so that you don't have to get into the brass tacks of, well, my coworker said this to me today, and I had 43 emails to respond to, because then it's like a tally list or keeping tabs on like, well, my day was also this. It's like a very nice, like simple way to say, yeah, I'm at 20%. I'm going to need help. And it's if you both are at 20%, we sit down and we say, okay, how are we going to do this with low batteries? Like, let's create a plan so that we don't end up in a screaming match or we don't end up lashing out at our kids or what have you. And I thought that was, good advice for not only sports field managers, but everyone. Is just a quick check-in could really save a lot of, vocal cords, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Well, I love your
sorry. I was going to say, I think the other piece to being present is to manage our technology. Most of us let our technology manage us versus us managing our technology. Mike and I, when we go out to dinner, it's no phones, right? The phones are not out. And we can't tell you how many times we look out around the restaurant and there'll be 4 people sitting at a table with each other, all on their phones, right? So
many of them communicating with each other while on their phones, sitting across from each other at the table. So there's a part of being an old fogey that I'm not quite, I can't get that. I struggle, but we have kids and we see that go on. But yeah, that's another part is you start figuring out technology, social media. There's so many more ways to communicate these days, good and bad. And how does that come into play with what we're talking about here? Because that's a very important part about being present. You could be right there sitting beside each other and might as well be in another country in terms of the communication.
Yeah, I definitely fall into that realm where, I manage all the social media for the company and then for the women in turf team. So it's like I always have this anxiety in my pocket, like what's happening that I don't want to miss the mark on something. Sometimes I've got to turn on that do not disturb, because I will definitely, 4-hour car ride to me looks like, oh, that's 4 hours of work I could get done. But that's also 4 hours that I could talk to my husband, hanging out with my kids, and kind of switching that mindset to be, I love that term present, not just sitting in the car, but really making time together special.
And we were talking, and you were talking about that 4 hours. We were kicking around because Meg was nice enough to send us some ideas about some questions here, because it's like, hey, we got to wrap our mind around what the heck we're going to say without me sounding like some kind of an idiot here. But Lisa made a comment about the importance of boredom. And we've been kind of down a body or two at the Turf Research Center here, which has resulted in me mowing more grass than I have in a long time. But I actually like to mow grass. The only challenge is I'm the most overpaid grass cutter in the country when I'm doing that. But that downtime, it's like she told me today in getting prepared, review Meg's questions, think about what we're going to talk about. And I went out there and mowed grass for about 2.5 hours. And again, I reset. I think I know what we want to cover. I feel better about what we're doing now instead of me doing this cold turkey, because I didn't have anything to distract me. I'm cutting grass, can mow reasonably straight lines with the mower. No one's going to, give me a hard time about that. And I told her, I said, I agree. That actually is a great time to reset, is for something as basic as me getting on a mower and cutting grass.
Yeah. Some of your craziest research ideas have come from, just kind of thinking, right? Just time to think.
Yeah. And that's my coworkers that I supervise are always worried about that, because all of us are guilty of the most ridiculous research ideas that just might have a chance of working. Probably not, but might usually come from when we have time to basically sit there and reset and think about things. And again, good or bad, there's definitely a lot of things that pop in our minds when it's quiet time.
Well, that's why all good ideas sometimes happen in the shower. You can't take your phone in there. So, but I always hear my husband having business conversations when he's in the shower. He's like, and I'm like, who are you talking to? It's like, I'm working out my master plan.
He's rehearsing it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, is there any?
I tell people as a speaker, and my career has basically become a presenter. And I am not a joke teller, etc. I do enjoy making people smile, laugh, etc. But when I drive down the road and I'm going to a meeting, if somebody's watching me, I'll have a joke, a canned joke that I'm like, this is a good one, but I'll practice it in the car. And I'm talking to myself, going through what my facial expressions are going to look like. And anyone that is listening to this say, I bet I know that stupid joke he's talking about. But I appreciate that if you're good at this, again, it takes practice. And so I'm telling my corny jokes to myself, driving down the road, praying nobody's driving beside me like, this dude's talking to himself. Look at this.
And you see, my biggest challenge with work-life balance, we kind of get off track. We get off track with things. We got to reel them back in.
Was that off track? I thought it was right there, right down the
middle. I loved it either way. And I will say a testament to you both is, not only how high of praise your talk comes from, but I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of groundskeepers, and the amount of time your names come up, and just being mentors or friends that have lent a hand. Dr. Goatley, I know John Klinsman, he speaks really highly of you. Drew Miller. I've had the opportunity to hear from both of you, from both of them, on how great the both of you are. So
you're telling me if my money has been well spent then on those guys. So
yep, exactly.
All right.
Well, is there any final golden nuggets or any tidbits you want to leave us with before we close it up?
Were you?
I know. I frequently say in the therapy room, we don't do everything perfectly, and sometimes we have to stop ourselves. Like sometimes, we're in the middle of something and we kind of get off track. It is okay to stop ourselves and say, "Hang on, I didn't do that well." The 5 most powerful words in any relationship are, "I owe you an apology." Don't be afraid to say that, right? Like if we have erred, if we have said something in a way or done something in a way or not been our best selves, if we have not brought our best self to our relationship, it is okay for us to reflect on that. And I think it's really meaningful for us to reflect on that and approach our partner. And if we owe them an apology, to say, "I owe you an apology," and own our behavior, and don't try to defend it. that I see that a lot in marriages that are unhealthy and have some dysfunctional patterns. They try to defend their bad behavior. And owning it, and saying that, and then and not saying it just to like skate through it this time, but really trying to have a spirit of, I want to try to improve that. What went wrong there, and how can I improve my part of that, and what do we need as a couple? So I think owning your behavior and apologizing if that's what you really need to do can be really powerful.
Yeah, and just do it. Just make that first step. Don't keep waiting, or I intended to, because then it'll be if only I had. And I'm like, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I would also say at the very end, when we do our work life presentation, and, one of the things we say is to think about, our jobs are important. Our careers are important. Work is meaningful. We both have had long-term careers. We both have worked throughout the time. I was always a working mother. I had a career before I had children. I've always been a working mom. And, so I don't want to downplay and say like we shouldn't be attentive to our careers at all. Like we should. There's a lot of meaning and value that comes from our work. At the same time, sometimes the pressures of work, pop up, and something has to be taken care of now. And so we always put our family on the back burner, right, to respond to, those things that are on our schedule, or, whatever, all those things that are happening at work that seem so important. But one of the things we end with is to say, no one on their deathbed ever said, I wish I had worked more.
Yeah.
That is not what we have regret about. That's not to say that we don't find value in our work, and that those have created meaningful relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Like many people have some very deep and significant relationships that began as a part of work, and the mentoring relationship and things like that. But, the things we have regret about are those moments that we missed, that we could have been there, but we chose not to, mm-hmm. right? So we have to be really mindful about being present in those moments that we'll never get back. Some moments we don't get back. And so we have to be really mindful about making active choices.
And that leads me to one last question. Now that you talked a little bit about being a working mom and just being working parents, and the beast that is, like, how do I possibly capture all the magic that is raising a child while at the same time needing to feed this career so that I could put food on the table for said child, and then try and keep a relationship alive, and it's overwhelming to even try and put that all in a nice little package of, how to attack that. But, what did you guys find to be successful when you were raising your kids, as far as how did you navigate both being working parents with that?
Well, and I see this a lot in the turf industry, involving your spouse and kids in work, to some degree. Yeah. And I see this a lot every day on Twitter and on the weekends in particular about what's going on. And Lisa would bring the kids out when we were in Mississippi, because that's when the kids were their youngest, and they'd be at the research farm, and I'd be doing things, and they might be flying a kite or, doing whatnot. So we kept engaged with that. And there would always be some little times in my teaching schedule, which was very involved back in that time in my career. And Thursday nights were dedicated families going to Burger King.
No, McDonald's had a Playland.
That's right. It's Playland and McDonald's. And that was what we did. No questions asked. We would meet at McDonald's for Playland before I would go off to Thursday night seminar class.
Because the kids would be in bed by the time you got back. Yeah.
So we would think about things like that. And again, it's coming back to that, making time for each other and putting value on that, the same as you would for work needs me, and just saying, hey, this is important. And much like I said earlier, my colleague here that I work with, that he had plans this weekend, and those plans were already set up, and I was going to take those plans away from him because that had been communicated, and we figured out another way to deal with it. But and I also trusted him that I knew that he had legit plans that were in play.
Right, that he wasn't just skipping out on work. And I think that's where your relationship with your employer comes in. I think they know if you're a dedicated employee, right? And that you take your work seriously, and that you want to be a part of that team. Mm-hmm. I think it's also, things are evolving in the work environment. Back when our kids were young, remote work was not a thing. Yeah. now we can do that. And, being able to flex your work schedule might be important, or, might be valuable, that, maybe you, aren't available at 3 p.m. when kids are getting home from school, but that when you put them to bed, you're back online taking care of work at 8 o'clock at night, right? Like, that might be a thing in terms of your work-life balance. If there's a particular, time of day that's really important, in the middle of the traditional work day, or, if there's a way, to kind of flex your time. And I think that's a little bit different, in the evolving workforce and, new generations coming into the workforce.
And there's one more thing that we talk about in this ever evolving presentation, but it's something that I had to learn and I'm still learning. And this is more towards the supervisor, assistant and the actual manager position, but that they've got to also be ready and able to turn things loose. And for the longest time for me, I felt like, nope, that's just too important. This is what I do. I've got to be there to deliver this program, as if my content was just so much more important than anyone else's.
I don't think that was your attitude. Your attitude is more, I don't want to burden somebody else by putting this on them, I think is why you kept a lot of things.
But it's another part of growth of a supervisor and an assistant to a supervisor to have enough confidence in your employees to task them and know that, hey, I'm going to step away. The only reason I want to hear from you is if you call and say the place is on fire.
Yep.
I have faith in you. I'm confident you can do a good job, and then actually exude to them that confidence that they can do this.
But I think it's also setting that expectation, or, that it's okay to make mistakes, or that if you need help, I'm here. I'm not going to punish you for that. Like, if you need some guidance or if something has happened, I don't want you to feel like you have to hide that from me because I'll be angry or something like that. I mean, and that takes a special relationship between, a mentor and a mentee, or a supervisor and employee, right?
Well, and I think, like, if it's not too far of a stretch, but I think that relationship between you and your employer, or you and your, your employee, is just as important as the one on the home front, if you want to have that good balance. Because that is something I hear continually, is like, the minute I was able to kind of let go and allow them to do the job that they signed up for as a manager, so much stress was lifted off my plate. Or as soon as I, established that trust with my employee, like, I was able to get away for a few extra hours every day, or what have you. But I think almost having, maybe it's not a calendar or, a weekly check-in like you would do with your spouse, but something similar where it's like, hey, my kid has a dentist appointment that I'm going to have to leave early on Tuesday, but I could stay extra on Thursday if you need to dip out for any reason this week, or what have you. I think that could be almost just as helpful on the work front as well.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think also, back to that kind of work culture thing, right? Like, having the expectation that people are going to take time off.
Yeah.
That's important, that, we all earn leave time at our jobs, but we never take it. There's some crazy statistic out there, like 51% of American workers don't use their annual leave. They leave it on the we were at a conference. Yeah, we were at a conference one time, and somebody was talking about how many hundreds of hours of leave time they had built up proudly, and I was like, that's not a badge of honor.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for burnout.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a recipe for burnout. And we have to make space for everyone. And I think if we function as a team and you have a good leader, there's space for everybody to be able to do that. Yeah. Right. And if we have that expectation that, we'll cover because you need to be away for this. And then I know that someone will cover for me when I need to be away for something else. And that not only is that okay, but we encourage that.
Exactly. Well, I promise this time when you give your goodbye regards, I won't cut you off. So if there's any last tidbits or truths of wisdom that you guys would like to share.
Got any more?
I gave mine. Mine was
we're waiting on you now. She already had her.
Yeah, I gave
Yeah, see, I'm nervous because she's going to say, see, you veered us off track again. We've always enjoyed doing this because it does give people a chance to kind of step aside and evaluate and think. And again, these are not subjects that are typically easy to talk about because I think we've all got very strong work ethic and we take such pride in what we do that we're like, can't talk about this. That's private. I'm like, I think we are more comfortable now talking about this. And what we always hope is that people come up and they do a great job, share with us what they've learned, because that's how this particular topic for us, and go around and discussing this with groups, how it's evolved is because somebody comes up and shares us with something that they did that's we never thought about that.
Yeah.
Some of the most powerful stories we hear, though, are from people who approach us and say, my marriage ended because I, and my wife will tell me it's because of, the work, or my partner will tell me that, I wasn't attentive enough to our relationship. And, so some of the most powerful stories we hear are stories of loss and people who, experienced sort of, moving into the space where, their relationship suffered to the point that it was, irretrievably lost. And there's so much pain in that if, we can, as an industry and as employees and managers, if we can help people, be able to navigate this work-life balance thing, it can be back to that win-win perspective, right? It doesn't have to be if the employee wins, the employer loses, right? Or vice versa, right? It can be back to that win-win perspective where a healthy employee who's healthy on the home front can be healthier in the workplace. And the employer can actually benefit from that as well.
I agree totally. And I definitely took up a lot of your guys' time. So I appreciate all the wisdom that you shared. I feel like I can go home and, be the wife of the year now.
There you go.
And the employee of the year. We'll see. But I really, really appreciate your time. I'm excited to attend your set. I'm sure you guys have a docket coming up at SFMA this year. So I'm sure I'll make time to come sit in on that as well.
Our pleasure.
Thank you guys so much. You have a great rest of your day. I hope if it is a holiday for you, then you get to enjoy some of it.
Thank you for having us.